Hello, this is Bethany Straw joining you from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the United States. Welcome to WREN's 13th quarterly webinar. Each webinar in the series offers a multinational perspective on various topics related to wind energy and wildlife interactions. Please visit tethys.pnnl.gov for the full archive. Today's webinar is focused on smart curtailment from the European and North American perspectives. First, we will hear from Luisa Rodriguez from the Institute for Nature Conservation and Forests, Portugal. Luisa will represent the European perspective discussing practical measures to reduce bat fatalities at wind farms. Between 2003 and 2016, approximately 8,300 fatalities were found in Europe, representing 28 or more species. With this in mind, alternative mitigation measures will be explained and implementation analyzed. Next, we will hear from Chrissy Setter from Natural Power. Chrissy will discuss smart curtailment for bats from the North American perspective. She will describe a study that utilized real-time bat activity at the nacelle to trigger curtailment, reducing fatalities by more than 80% and impact to energy yield by 40%. She will also touch on how bat exposure patterns are expected to impact this approach and how to model this in advance of implementing smart curtailment. Luisa Rodriguez has worked for the Institute for Nature Conservation and Forests, Portugal since 1987. She works mainly with bats, and efforts include conservation, monitoring, impact assessment, public awareness, and applied scientific studies. She received her master's in conservation of animal diversity in 1996 and her PhD in ecology in 2008. Luisa is the Portuguese focal point for Eurobats, and she coordinates the Intersessional Working Group on Wind Turbines and Bat Populations. Chrissy Setter is the Head of Environment for Natural Power in the United States. She has worked on bat conservation issues since receiving her master's in life science and bat ecology in 1994. For the last 15 years, Chrissy has focused almost exclusively on the interactions between wind and wildlife. During that time, she has developed several patented technologies that minimize interactions between wind turbines and bats and condors. Chrissy's current focus is on SCADA integrated detection and curtailment systems that minimize wildlife fatalities and maximize energy yield. Welcome, Chrissy and Luisa, and thank you for joining us today. With that, I pass it to you, Luisa.
Okay, so good afternoon from Portugal, and I'd like to begin first thanking this invitation. It is a great pleasure to participate in this event. Most of the information that I'll share with you has been collected by the members of the Eurobat Intersessional Working Group. This group includes 49 colleagues from 29 countries. Some members are very active, and we work really collaboratively, so I'd like to publicly thank their enthusiasm and hard work. As you already heard, between 2003 and 2016, around 8,300 fatalities were found both accidentally and during post-construction monitoring studies in Europe. This number reflects by no means the real extent of bat mortality at wind turbines. The first reason is that it is based only on the values reported to the working group. And secondly, it does not reflect the effective mortality that must take into account different sources of biases, such as the survey effort, the removal of carcasses by predators, the searcher efficiency, and the percentage of the area really searched. These data show that up to now, at least 28 species have been killed by wind turbines in Europe. Of course, that the analysis of the effects of this additional mortality on different species in different countries should be based on populational effects, but unfortunately, until now, this approach cannot be applied due to the lack of population data. So we'll take into consideration the conservation status of different species on national level. One of the major tasks of the International Union for Conservation of Nature is the preparation of the red list of certain species. There is a global list that applies to the distribution area of its species, and for many countries, they are least prepared for the national situation. These are the categories used. Yes?
Some people are having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Could you please make sure to speak up and speak as directly into your phone as possible? I think it's a little bit muffled. Thank you very much.
We'll try. Is it better now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. So these are the categories used to classify the status of each species. We'll analyze the status of the species that have been killed by wind turbines. In red, species threatened, and these include critically endangered and vulnerable. It applies to taxa on the basis of quantitative criteria designed to reflect varying degrees of threat of extinction. Species near threatened. It applies to taxa that do not qualify at the moment, but may be close to qualifying, such as, and also not currently meet the criteria for a threatened category, but are likely to do so if conservation actions abate or cease. In green, species, it applies to taxa that do not qualify and are not close to qualify, threatened or near threatened. In gray, species that are data deficient. It applies to taxa when there is inadequate information to make a direct or of its risk of extinction. Therefore, it is not a category, but listing of data in this category indicates that more information is required and acknowledges the possibility research will show that threatened classification is appropriate. And finally, species that were not evaluated. Please try to remember this color. Threatened, yellow, near threatened, green, least concern, gray, data deficient, and white, not evaluated. Going back to the species found dead per country and analyzing only the information of confirmed species registered in countries where information on categories was available, we can see that, in general, species with higher number of registered fatalities are not threatened. However, problematic situations may appear in different countries for near-threatened species, such as Nyctalus nocturnus or Pipistrellus natusi in France. And we cannot forget that Asian species may be threatened. That is the case of Nyctalus in Germany and also in Portugal. Taking into account this situation, what can be done in order to prevent bat fatalities? Until around 2010, several mitigation measures were theoretically suggested, but there are no references about their application. Some measures regard site selection and include avoidance of important habitats or buffer zones around them. Other measures regard operation and include initial ideas of operational mitigation, such as to stop turbines during periods of high risk, to lock blades in place while turbine is not operating, synchronize operations of 10 turbines in a row of turbines, reduce the amount of flying insects around turbines and blades, remove or relocate turbines if fatalities are concentrated at specific turbines, and remove broken and non-operating wind turbines. Some of these suggestions were incorporated in the first version of Guidelines for Consideration of Bats in Wind Farm Projects prepared by Eurobats in 2008. This document was later updated in 2014. Meanwhile, several studies on deterrence were performed, such as the use of radar, ultrasonic noise emission, and ultraviolet light. Yellow references means experiences done in Europe. Although some studies showed a reduction of bat fatalities, since the variation value is very high, and even in some cases the mortality raised, and also because of the costs of deterrence are enormous, so far none of these systems can be used as a functional system to deter bats from wind turbines. Several experiences on the raising of the turbine continuing speeds have also been done, all showing very good results. Again, yellow references regard to experiences done in Europe. And you can see that in all experiments, a reduction in the number of fatalities was found. Also, several experiments on blade feathering have also been done, and again, also showing very good results with a real effect in the decreasing in the number of fatalities. A study to compare the effectiveness of different operational minimization strategies was done in 3 different years. In the first year, the control of the turbines was done in using the normal turbine operation at 3 meters per second cut-in speed. And this was compared to the blade feather less than 5 meters per second in the first 4 hours of the night, and with a second group with the blade feather also less than 5 meters per second, but during the entire night. And in this year, were based on a 3-minute wind speed averages, and that was measured at the meteorological tower. It was observed a reduction in the second treatment group. It was found a significant difference between the second treatment group and control, and it was found no difference between the first treatment group and control. In another year, the control was exactly the same, but it was studied in the first treatment group, the increased cut-in speed it was raised to 5 meters per second. In a second group, it was raised to 6.5 meters per second during all night. And in this case, the operational changes were based on a 10-minute wind speed averages, also measured at the meteorological tower. In this case, it was found a reduced number of fatalities also in the second and also in the first treatment groups. So both groups caused or showed a decrease in the number of fatalities. It was also found a significant difference for both treatment groups versus the control, and it was not found any significant difference between the 2 treatment groups. In the last year, when we come to this year, operational adjustment was already being implemented during the previous autumn migration period, and in this case, the control was the turbines had increased cut-in speeds. They were increased to 5 meters per second during all night, and it was based on the 10-minute wind speed averages that was measured at the meteorological tower. And this was compared to 2 groups. The first group, the 20-minute wind speed average was measured at the meteorological tower, and the second was measured at each turbine. And the results showed that the number of fatalities were reduced when the turbine operations were based on the meteorological tower, and also it was reduced when the decision time was extended from 10 to 20 minutes. So this shows the situations caused a reduction in the number of fatalities. Other approaches have been proposed to obtain real-time data on bat activity and optimize operational curtailment of wind turbines. The prototype DC-BAT system intends to mitigate the collision risk of the hypothetical 95% of the bats. Stops operation between mid-March and to end of October in the night under certain meteorological conditions. The prototype ATOM system imaging with acoustic and ultrasound sensors to continuously monitor bat abundance, flight height, direction, and speed. And the TIRM system activity and weather data in predictive models that link these parameters to bat curtail only when bats are present. However, these systems still need further improvements and tests to be recommended. These findings support that operational mitigation through the increase of wind turbine cut-in speeds, feathering turbine blades, and/or shutdown on demand remains most effective and the only proven way to reduce bat fatalities at wind energy facilities. And how has the situation been accompanied by Eurobat? Well, in 2006, a first resolution on this topic was approved. It includes a reference to the existence of some unsuitable habitats or sites for the construction of wind turbines at a local, regional, and national scale. In 2010, A second resolution was approved replacing the older. In this second resolution, it is already also said that it encouraged use of blade feathering to mitigate bat mortality. In the last session, in 2014, a third resolution was approved, including for the first time offshore projects. Regarding curtailment, it is much more complete than the previous. It promotes the use of blade feathering, higher turbine curtain wind speeds, and shutting down turbines temporarily to reduce or avoid bat mortality. A few years ago, the implementation of these measures was based on wind speeds alone. Nowadays, it can be enhanced by site-specific algorithms that adjust turbines operation based on a combination of different environmental parameters, such as wind speed, temperature, precipitation, time of day and season, and also on bat activity itself, in order to decrease shut-off times and make the option of such measures more economically feasible for wind developers. A commercial system called Curtailment was developed in France, and it has been implemented in several wind farms in France and Belgium. In 2017, a questionnaire on post-construction monitoring and on implementation of mitigation measures was sent to Eurobat parties and non-party WREN states. Let's see the results on the prescription of avoidance and mitigation measures. Regarding the implementation of these measures, 11 countries reported that measures were not implemented, and 12 countries reported that measures were implemented, including shutdown of the wind turbine during specific hours or migration periods, or the use of turbine-specific curtailment algorithms, the blade feathering in combination with increased cut-in speed, the increased cut-in speed only, or the combination of increased cut-in speed and deterrence. Regarding the monitoring of effectiveness of the mitigation measures, of the 12 countries that reported the prescription of mitigation measures, 7 countries reported that effectiveness has been monitored, and 5 countries reported that effectiveness has not been monitored. Regarding the question if the implemented mitigation measures are controlled by authorities, the great majority of countries reported that the prescription of mitigation measures is controlled by authorities, which is naturally very good. In conclusion, the global picture shows that the situation in Europe is improving, but very slowly. That needs all our efforts in order to improve their situation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Luisa, for that great presentation. We're starting to get a few questions in, but please go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box that you would like Luisa to respond to. So, Luisa, the first question we have is for those on the presentation, for those here in the webinar who are not familiar with the terminology of blade feathering, could you please describe what blade feathering is?
Okay, it's the adjusting of an angle of the rotor blade parallel to the wind, or turning the whole unit out of the wind to slow or to stop the blade rotation.
Thank you for responding to that. So does anyone else have any other questions that you'd like to ask Luisa? Here's another one that's just come in. The question is, are copies of this presentation made available to download? So this presentation will be in the recording of the webinar that will be available on the WREN website, and you'll be able to view that on the website very shortly. We usually post that within the next couple of days. So please look for that. The next question we have is back to you, Luisa. How do you feel developers are doing to avoid high bat use areas to begin with?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
How do you feel developers are doing to avoid high bat use areas to begin with?
Well, I would say that, at least in Portugal, there has been a big evolution in the situation from the beginning to nowadays. And in the beginning, the developers were very critical about this situation. I think that they tend to believe that we were overreacting and we were thinking of a problem that might not really happen. But now they are much more sensitive to the problem, and we have national guidelines for to help the teams that are monitoring the projects and to developers to know exactly the way that they should do the work. And these guidelines were first prepared in 2004, and they have been regularly updated. And for each update, we normally organize a meeting with people from the Ministry of Environment, with the developers, and also with the teams. And they are very active, and I believe that now they feel this cause as their own cause. So there is really also a good collaboration, and they are, well, I even saw that in the list of participants that are now taking part in the webinar, that some developers, Portuguese developers that I know the names, are also seeing this. So they are really willing, trying to participate and to do as much as they can do to save the bats.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, have you tested timer in Europe?
No, well, actually, at least I tried to find some information that I couldn't. I am not completely sure if it is have been tested, but at least I did not find any reference to that. And I would like to take the opportunity just to point out that in each slide there is since this is a revision work, I include always the references where the information was taken from. So it is very easy for people to get to the reports or to the works that really describe all the things that I tried to share with you, because this is not really my work, but I just tried to collect as much information as I could find. So I believe that the people can, it is very easy for them to try to find the baseline data.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is mitigation required by law or is it voluntary?
Well, it depends on the countries. In Portugal, when you have impact study, then in the present it is only required if the project is too close to routes that are considered to be of national importance. But this is the case here. I know that in other countries the situation is different. So in some countries, as we saw in the slides, some of them they are not even prescribing any mitigation, and in others they are trying to implement it in all the projects. So the situation is moving, but at least Eurobats are trying to push the governments to do so. So the idea is trying to, at least for the most important routes that might be at risk, that they exist. But it is different, and it depends on the national legislation.
Great, thank you. Our next question is actually for our next speaker, Christine. Christine, will you be talking about the timer technology also in your presentation today?
So I will be talking about the study that was done under the funding of EPRI, which is what people commonly refer to as the timer study, yes.
Okay, thanks for responding to that. We look forward to hearing more in just a few minutes. Back to Luisa. The question is, have researchers in Portugal found any link between pre-construction bat activity and post-construction mortality?
Well, that is a tricky question. Well, the thing is that in some studies they have, in others they haven't. So it is not a direct correlation. But the situation is that in Portugal we are only using we are only trying to assess the activity at the ground level, not in height, and that probably will make the difference. So, but even when you have microphones in the height of the turbine, sometimes there is not a correct correlation between the activity and later the mortality. But even so, well, I think that the idea is trying to now to improve the pre-construction studies, trying to access better the back activity, so then later we can try to correlate that with the post-monitoring activity and mortality.
Great, thank you. The next one is, do you think that we can include curtailment measures in a European directive or a European agreement to implement such measures across Europe?
Well, the thing is that Eurobats is not completely binding, so we can recommend, but they cannot really oblige the government. If the measure would be included in a document by the Habitat Directive, that would be different, because the rules, including the Habitat Directive, they must be implemented by the government, or otherwise they may have problems, and in the worst situations because they need to make regular reports on the implementation measures. So I believe that now only with Eurobats it is not an obligation, but if the Habitat Directive would like to, if you could include the prescription of mitigation measures in the Habitat Directive in any place, that would be much more effective.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, are mitigation strategies site-specific, and is work being done on the transferability of these strategies based on site characteristics?
Well, there are some measures that are site-specific, and particularly they are depending on the database of the species, of that species that appear in that zone. That is the case of the mitigation that has been done in Germany. They designed specific algorithms that take into consideration the species that normally flies near their turbines, and so they cannot be directly applied in other places unless the new species would be added to that one. So the idea, I would say, that the future will have algorithms for big regions with big geographical with similar geographical characteristics, and also that also could take into consideration the real-time activity, because until now the mitigation solutions that have been implemented, they only take into consideration activity, but that is recorded. It's not what is happening at the time. So they enter with temperature, with relative humidity, with several factors, but not with the real activity that is being recording at the time. But I would say that in the future that would be what will happen.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, 7 countries confirmed that mitigation measures are being monitored. Is this monitoring standardized and being passed on to Eurobats?
Well, there is no obligation to send it to Eurobats. That is a responsibility of each government. So I can say that in Portugal there is, which is the only situation that I know more specifically, that there is an effort trying to take a coherent accompanying process with the monitoring. So there is one agency which is in charge of all the process, and this is where I work. We analyzed all the reports regarding that, and so we try that all of them are analyzed in the same way, and so they use the same guidelines. But I would say that in most European countries that belong to Eurobats, so we have those Eurobats guidelines, and in the majority of countries they have been translated to the different languages and are being applied by the different governments. But it's up to them the way to really implement and to take care of their own processes. There is no obligation then in the working group we always try to collect information, but we don't really receive information for all countries. But even in the last years, the situation is also improving. So now we are receiving much more information than in the beginning. So we hope that in the future the governments will participate more in these processes.
Excellent, thank you. The next question is, what is the highest fatality per megawatt per year found so far in your studies?
Well, I must confess that I have no idea. I don't know the number by heart. We have that slide which shows mortality per country, but it not shows the mortality per country. It shows the number of fatalities found per country, and we can see that the major number of fatalities, I think that it appears in Germany. Yeah, it's this one. But Germany has many wind farms, so I cannot transform these in mortality per megawatt, so I have no idea. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you for responding to that. The next question is, can you please elaborate on the prototype deterrent techniques? What's needed to make them operational or prove their efficacy?
Well, I must confess that is, I know that the only thing that I can say is that what I read in the leaflets and what I read in the books where they are referred. I never saw one of those prototypes acting, so I'm not really sure what they really need to develop more to be proven. But what we really need is that if they are being implemented, we need the reports of implementation to be sure that they act well. So we cannot only read the description. So what I did regarding, let's say, Curtailment, which is the one that has a commercial site, I wrote them and asked if they were already implemented in any wind farms, and they told me yes, but they don't have any yet any reports on the accuracy of the implementation. So to recommend a prototype or any of those models, we need to be sure that they really are effective, and so that we can recommend the model to be widely used.
Great, thank you. The next question is, were the measures of curtailment applied only to specific turbines or to all the turbines at the wind farm?
Well, it depends on the project, and what is said by the government or by the agency that controls the process, because there are no, what we know is that the curtailment really helps best, because all the experiences show that with those measures the level of the fatalities decrease. So ideally they should be applied to all turbines, but that of course could have economical losses, and so it must be taken into consideration. Well, I would say that at least wind farms that are close to important boosts, they could apply to all the turbines, but it depends on the spirit of each government. That must be decided case by case.
Great, thanks. The next question is asking if you know why deterrents have not been very effective in Europe.
Well, I must say that I believe that they have never been tested in Europe. What I was saying that, well, at least deterrents of acoustic. Well, there are 3 types of deterrents, and let's see what. I think it's the next one. No, this one. So the radar, they showed to be effective in some cases, but not in others. And the radar also may have the cause that they can affect negatively some species and positively other species. So they might deter some or even increase the approach of others. And also they might affect other species other than bats. And so there are several, and also there is a huge difficulty to identify bats using radars because they are much smaller than birds. Radar seems to work really very well with birds, particularly with diurnal birds. But since bats, they are very small and they find it in the dark during the night, so they have not proven to be an easy way, and so the tests were even, well, they were not tried anymore. Then the ultraviolet light was not tested at all as much as I know it in Europe. And regarding the emission of ultrasonic noise, it was the same, that not those to be deterred. So there were only one experience in Europe, and then it was, well, until now it has been abandoned. And also because then the results of the increase of the cutting speed and also the feathering, they showed to be as good. So they decided, I think that I believe that probably the use of deterrents was at that time a little bit put away because the others showed to be very good, and they were much simpler and they were not as expensive as deterrents.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what are the deterrent technologies that have been used in combination with turbine feathering in Spain and other countries?
Well, that I must say that I don't know, because the questionnaire only has like themes, and the responder choose their answer. So they are not measured, but I believe that there were experiences with radar, because in Spain there are several wind farms where radar is taking place for birds. So I believe that they have been thinking about their use also to bats, but I'm not really sure.
Thank you. Next question is, in your opinion, should curtailment be applied when mortality reaches which levels? So where is the threshold that this should be applied?
Well, this is a very problematic question as well, because the Habitat Directive, the spirit of, well, theoretically, the Habitat Directive says that the idea is that no death can occur. And so in many countries, well, there's been some discussion even inside the working group, because for some countries it is not acceptable any threshold, because the spirit of the directive says that we shouldn't allow any threshold. But others, such as Germany, they believe that there is an opening in the directive to find a threshold, and we should only are worried and take our attention to significant mortality. So, but until now, there is no official threshold, even a consensus about the existence and acceptance of thresholds.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about offshore wind farms, and the asking is, can you comment on whether or not there has been bat mortality observed at offshore wind farms?
Well, we know very little about offshore wind farms because, of course, it's very difficult trying to understand if there is mortality or not. So, as far as I know, the measures that, the idea is that we should take measures in order to prevent mortality, but we are not really, because if there is mortality on onshore wind farms, if bats are flying offshore, so the level of mortality should be the same. So the most important thing is trying to access in the site of the offshore facility if there are bats flying in the night or not. So if they are, and if they are in high numbers, so I would say that some mitigation should be done, but that is a personal view because until now the discussion is not in the same level as for onshore wind farms.
Okay, thank you. And our last question is just asking to clarify something in the presentation, which is on the slide that shows the numbers for the bat mortality table, 2003 to 2016. Are the carcasses, are they found carcasses or are they corrected mortality numbers?
So this is actually now I'm looking to the title and it's wrong. It should be fatality. It's not mortality. It's only the number of carcasses found and that are registered in each country. It's not the mortality that should be taking into consideration the other, such as the search efficiency and the removal of the carcasses and the survey efforts and also the area. So this is the number of carcasses found in the field. It's not mortality corrected.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you for everyone who asked great questions. Right before we move on, we got one much to our speakers for fantastic presentations, and thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate you taking the time, and that wraps up our webinar. So thanks everybody. Goodbye.